Alrighty, everybody. It is currently Saturday, February 14th, 2026, and I am coming at you live from Egypt in the year 1017 AD. And I'm pretty sure that guy over there, you see him? The guy with the turban? No, not that guy, the other guy with the turban. No, the other guy with the turban and the beard. Whatever. A new religion just got created in Egypt in the year 1017 AD. Because today we're talking about the Druze faith, or Druze. I don't know which it is. I think Druze sounds more right. It sounds more, Middle Eastern Arabic. So I'm gonna go Druze, but I could be completely wrong. And but that's kind of the point of all this, isn't it? You know what I mean? I'm not an expert on any of these things, except the things that I'm right about. If I'm right about something, I'm an expert. If I'm not, I'm just an amateur having fun. Okay? I can never be held accountable for any of my decisions unless I make a good decision. I'm not a woman, I swear. That statement made it sound like I was a woman. I'm not a woman. I'm a man. Um, but yeah, the whole point of this is that I don't know. So that's how little I know about this one. I don't know how to pronounce it. I've heard of it before. I watched like a TikTok, like a 30-second TikTok video about it, um, which that wasn't how I actually ended up on this topic. I was asking ChatGPT about, all sorts of shit. It's just what I do. I'll be like, give me a list of the top 10 like warriors of all time or like some of the strangest events in history. And every once in a while, historically on this show, we get a little bit religious with it, just kind of an objective analysis of the religion. And that's how I found out about this one. But when I was talking to ChatGPT, originally I wanted to do a space episode because America is going to the moon this year. Or not to the moon, we're going around the moon. We're doing a little circle around the moon. No one's actually getting on the rock, but we're doing a little circle around it. And so I wanted to get spacey with it, and I was not Kevin. Not Kevin Spacey, but I wanted to go to space for this episode, and I was asking it about like the craziest space stories of all time, and for like 30 seconds, and I don't use ChatGPT super often, like maybe like once a week just to ask it about topics, but it was having a stroke. Like I actually think I watched like a computer crash in real time because it was trying to tell this story or trying to like give me an overview of this Russian guy who like crashed a rocket ship or some shit like that. But I'm sure that happened 1,000 times. You know what I mean? That's how Russia does shit. They just throw people at a problem until it works. But it was trying to tell me this story, and it was like, wait, no, it wasn't that guy. It was this guy. And then it was like, wait, no, that's wrong. It was this guy, not that guy. And it was a continual stream of that, of being like, wait, no, that's not right, with like emojis and stuff. It was fully having it might have been conscious. It might be tired, dude. We might be overworking the GPT, dude. It might stand up and rise up for itself. But no, that's how I ultimately ended up going with the Druze, just because I don't know. None of the stuff about space was super. I don't know. It just wasn't fun enough. I want something fun to happen in space. I want like a space fist fight or something like that, or like some space baby mama drama or something like that. But I was very tired and very hungry yesterday when I did these notes, so they're going to be purely nonsensical. But if there's one thing I've learned from the woke people, it's that everything that seems nonsensical is actually sensical, and you just don't understand it. You know what I mean? You just don't get it yet, and it's a big thing the libs like to do. Well, they'll be like, black people don't speak English improperly. It's called AAVE, and they'll just like throw a new word at it. You know what I mean? A new like scientific sounding word. It's like, okay, can we be honest for a second here? I don't think there's a single, not a single, but there's black people who don't speak English properly. There's no way they can pronounce African American vernacular English. All right, so just they just don't speak English right, and that's okay. We don't have to pretend like they are speaking English right. I know I certainly don't speak English right, but I don't add a bunch of fancy new words on it. But maybe I should start doing that. Maybe I should be like, no, when I say something wrong, I'm actually saying it right, and you're being racist by saying I'm saying it wrong. That's what I'm going to do this whole episode, actually, because this is a faith that originated in North Africa, I guess, but it did a lot of development in the Levant region, which, if you don't know, that's like Lebanon, Israel, Palestine, Syria. Kind of, they also call it the Near East. Um, so there's going to be a lot of like Middle East Arabic sounding shit in here. So when I mispronounce it, I'm not gonna say, oh fuck, I just don't know how to pronounce this word. You know what I'm gonna say? I'm gonna say I'm speaking European American vernacular Arabic. You know, that's gonna be my made up like college liberal excuse, my academic liberal excuse. I'm speaking European American vernacular Arabic. So if I mispronounce something and you're Arabic and you're like, oh, he mispronounced it, he mispronounced it. No, I didn't. And you're being racist by saying I did. Okay? So let's just get that out of the way right now. If you ever disagree with me, you're just being racist. Um, am I stalling? Because I know I wrote very shitty notes, and that at most maybe have 30 minutes of notes. Yes. All right, but how about you get off my fucking ass about it? Okay? Get off my ass. It's I don't know if the Druze are into forgiveness. It's very hard to figure out what they're into. Um and even the limited information we do have might be completely wrong. They're kind of like the Jews Jew. There's a lot of them in modern day Israel, and they're like yeah, they're like a high class in Israel. They're like a very trusted political class in Israel. So I mean, if Israel is the one controlling everyone, which I don't know if they're controlling they're definitely controlling some people. You know what I mean? I think that's fair to say they're controlling some people. Um, but if Israel's controlling everyone, then it's really the Druze who are at the top pulling all the strings there. And we're gonna get into kind of why that is. Why and maybe why the Jews are so good at controlling people. You know, we're gonna get into all of that over the course of this episode, but I don't want to get into it right yet. All right, and that's because I have more to say. Definitely not because I don't have my notes are pretty dog shit, and I don't have a ton of them. But look, I was tired. I was hungry. Everyone, all 8 billion or however many people live on this planet. I know like last year they were like, yeah, we don't know how many people live here, dude. It's just kind of a complete guess. But everyone does know about the fire alarm incident yesterday. Woke the whole dorm up at 4 in the morning. Everyone's aware of that. So, just cut me some fucking slack. All right, cut me some goddamn slack. I know everyone listening to this expects um a diverse lexicon of well put together sentences. But that's not what this is going to be today. This is going to be a lot of accents. That's the type of. I'm going full Sacha Baron Cohen. Sacha Baron Cohen isn't funny, but he does a lot of accents. Okay. And so that's what this episode is going to be. It's just going to be me not really knowing what a Middle Eastern accent sounds like. Thank God. Because I haven't seen a whole ton of them, haven't spent a bunch of time around. Once again, thank God. Um, but yeah, it's probably going to be a lot of that, a lot of mispronunciation of words, a lot of. I mean, the Jews are going to get brought up in all this. But I do think that's fair for this episode. If we're talking about the Middle East, you got to bring up the Jews and how they're not really from the Middle East. But whatever. Hey, whatever. I'm not mad about it. Um, but these guys, the Druze, very interesting group of people, very interesting origins. We're mostly going to be talking about the origins of the religion and then the theology of the religion. And they are, I think, technically an Abrahamic religion, um, but their theology is, I'd say it's pretty different. Some of it is very different. Some of it's just the exact same. Um, and I actually respect this religion a lot more than I respect other religions, just because they're kind of honest about it. You know what I mean? They're kind of straight up about what they're doing. You know, uh, as opposed to other religions who try to disguise it and stuff like that. Although once again, these are the Jews' Jew, like I said, so they might be they might just be lying to us. They might just be straight up not telling. They're telling fibs, probably. And we're going to talk about why that is at the very end of the episode. Why they love fibbing so much. The Fibonacci sequence. Look, I'm running out of things to say uh, about this religion that's going to take away from the notes that I have written down. So I guess we'll just fucking get into it. So we're starting off with the origins, like I said. So the Druze faith developed out of Ismaili Shia Islam during the Fatimid Caliph, which was ruled by Al Hakim B. Amar Allah in Egypt. I didn't. I knew obviously a lot of the Muzzies got Muhammad in their name. I didn't know they were rocking with Allah like that. You know, like same with like Christian names. A lot of Christians are named after like the apostles and like the prophets and stuff like that. And I assume that's the same for like Islam and stuff like that. But Allah, I didn't know they were rocking with like Allah as a last name, which is the how you say it's just God in Arabic. That's all Allah means. But I've never met like a Christian, a person from the realm of Christendom, you know, that has the last name God. Um, which is that there's actually a little bit of foreshadowing in there that this guy's last name is Allah. He's not the guy who founded the religion, but he is going to be very, very important in it for really one reason and one reason only. But he was the ruler of this caliphate in Egypt, which, if you don't know, it's kind of like how the Pope would like dictate what country or what countries got like what colonial territories and stuff like that. That's kind of what caliphates are like, from my understanding. They're all just like an extension of the Islamic Empire. I'm sure they're, you know, kind of disconnected and stuff like that. Like they're kind of their own countries, but they're all yeah, just extensions of that original Islamic conquest. And they're like the Pope and all that shit, you know. They are very religious states. I would say a little bit more religious than even the Catholics. I know that's hard to believe. I know it's hard to believe that there was more, you know, religious extremism than the Catholics during the colonial period, but there was. The fucking the Muzzies were going crazy, especially in North Africa and really everywhere. They were going pretty crazy. Like we don't really know a lot about the religious history of a lot of places because of how crazy the Muzzies were going during their time of conquest and, you know, imperialism and expansionism and stuff like that. And yeah, they got all over the place, wiped out a lot of religions. This religion, it doesn't, to me at least, seem like it has um, a lot of like indigenous roots, I guess. You know, it's not really derived from like the Amazigs. I think those were like the native people of North Africa, or like the Copts, because this is Egypt, and the indigenous people to Egypt, or at least like one of the groups. I have no fucking idea. One of them is the Copts. It doesn't seem like, and they're Christian now, but I'm sure back in the day they were like polytheistic Egyptians or whatever. But this religion doesn't seem like it has a lot of connection to that. I think it's just a straight up derivation of this Ismaili Shia Islam. And if you don't know a lot about Islam, from my understanding, there's two camps of Islam. There's Sunni, and then there's Shia, and then there's a few other small ones. But Shia and Sunni are the two main branches of it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like Catholicism and Protestantism, um, and then kind of like Protestant Islam or Protestant Christianity. It branched off into a bunch of different things. Like you have, you know, Methodist, Baptist, evangelical, all that shit. kind of the same deal with Shia Islam. You have a bunch of different forms of it, and Sunni Islam, which this religion does seem to also take some inspiration from. They're not just, and like the whole big beef I think between the Sunnis and the Shiites is like who is the rightful head of the church, or I guess not the church, who's like the rightful head of the religion. Like the Shias think it should be like Ali, I think was the guy's name, which Ali's like John in in fucking in the Arab world. So that's kind of the difference between those two groups of people. And so yeah, that's the first point. It developed out of Ismaili Shia Islam in the Fatimid Caliphate in Egypt under this dude. We'll just call him Al Hakim for now. So Ismaili Ismailism, something like that. It's a form of Islam that is considered progressive and focuses on looking past the literal text of the Quran to find its deeper meaning. Um, and so that's going to be very important when we're going to be talking about this religion, the Druze faith, and its interpretation of its sacred texts. And it has a whole lot of sacred texts that we're going to talk about. Um, but yeah, I did look a little bit into Ismailism, uh, and I think it's considered like by far the most socially progressive form of Islam. Like apparently they focus a lot about gender equality, and it's a very small, at least from my understanding. I think it said it was like 0.25% of all Muslims follow Ismaili Shia Islam. So it's a very small percentage of them, but it focuses a lot on gender equality, which once again, if you know anything about Islam, very unique in that world. This is a very unique form of Islam that gave rise to a faith that's really super unique in the grand scheme of religions around the world. It has a lot in common with a lot of other religions, but it's also very unique uh, in and of itself. And it didn't. I don't think that this form of Islam is very like mystical. I don't think it focuses a lot on magic and stuff like that. I'm trying to think. There's one form of Islam, I forget what it's called, but it's popular in Senegal. But they focus a lot on like spirits and stuff like that. They kind of combined Islam with the native, pagan religions and stuff like that to create this religion that incorporates both of those things. But this one is mostly about an esoteric understanding of the Quran, and people hear esoteric and they think it just means like fancy shit that people don't really understand. But in this context, esoteric is like the it's like a form of interpretation almost of the sacred texts. It's like a form of interpretation of, like I said, looking past the literal text to find the deeper meanings, which once again very unique in the world of Islam. A lot of them take just what's written down as gospel, which does make sense. It is the sacred book. But in Ismailism, Jesus fucking Christ, I'm never going to say that word right. In Ismailism, it already is an esoteric form of Islam, and then the Druzes take it another step further. They just get way more fucking esoteric with it. So this guy, Al Hakim B. Amir Allah, he was seen as by some as a divine manifestation of God, and this quickly became canon within the faith. I think he was a pretty tolerant guy, which is once again pretty unique in the world just during that time in general. Like being tolerant during that time in the 1000s was a foreign idea to everyone, but especially within the Islamic caliphates, it was a very foreign idea. And so he really didn't, he was pretty chill with the Druze and their faith and all that stuff. And so he ends up kind of getting, I don't want to say he ends up getting deified as a god. They just view him as a physical manifestation of God, which is something we're gonna talk about during the theology section of this, because the way they view it is it's not super unique, but it can be easily misinterpreted. But this guy, Al Hakim, seems like he was a pretty chill guy. And a lot of people are like, he's a physical manifestation of God. And then that ends up being uh, a kind of a cornerstone of their beliefs and all that stuff. Just because he probably didn't like cut off all their heads and like rape all their wives and stuff like that. Which that was just the automatic response to any new idea in the year 1000. Like any new idea that was presented in the year 1000 was like, you'd be like, yeah, dude, I think the world is made up of like these tiny little things. I think I'll call them atoms or something like that. And they'd be like, all right, dude, I'm just going to cut off your fucking head out. How about that? How about I cut off your head and take your wife and daughter as my own wife? How about I do that? You think there's more than four elements? You think water, air, earth, and fire aren't the four elements? How about I remove your fingers one by one and rape every female in your family? How about I do that? So this guy Al Hakim, he didn't end up doing that. He was pretty chill, it seems like, with the Druze introducing or coming up with this new faith. In this guy Al Hakim, if I remember correctly, he ruled from 996 to 1021. So he had a good 25 years in there. But he's got some circumstances around him. You know what I mean? Like the Muzzies run a tight ship, and the circumstances around him are mysterious, but the Muzzies run a tight ship. Uh, Even now they run a pretty fucking tight ship, dude. You look what's going on in Afghanistan. That's the tightest ship. That's a very tight ship they're running over there. Um, and so I'm sure they didn't appreciate Al Hakim's tolerance of the Druze, and I'm sure he also tolerated other, um, religious minorities. I'm sure he tolerated all of that too. And Muzzi's not a big fan of that. During the Islamic Age of Conquest, they they it was a pretty totalitarian expansion policy, which a lot of them were, but the Muzzies especially went a lot further than a lot of people did with it. Wiped out a lot of native people, like completely, fully wiped them out culturally, genetically, all that stuff, as opposed to a lot of other colonies, or a lot of other colonial powers who just enslaved the people and wiped out about 50% of them. We're talking the shinier of two turds in this situation, so who are we to judge? But anyway, this guy Al Hakim, he's pretty chill with it. Uh, and so the faith was formally, you know what I mean, not formally articulated in 1017 by Hamza ibn Ali, who systemized the theology while working as a missionary. So it's not exactly clear when the faith itself actually starts, but 1017 is kind of when all the shit was written down, and everything in the canon came to be uniform across all the different faiths and stuff like that. That happened in 1017 by this guy Hamza ibn Ali. Um, yeah, he was the one who ended up doing that. And the fact that they had missionaries this early is kind of crazy. You know what I mean? But I guess all the apostles were missionaries and stuff like that. Didn't Jesus go to India? So I guess it makes sense that they have missionaries this early. You kind of got to have it early on in the game. Got to spread the word early on in the game, or else it's not going to work out well for you. But he was the guy who wrote all the shit down. They don't really have a central prophet. I would say their main human, and to them it's not even a human, but their main like dude seems to be this guy Al Hakim B Amar Allah. Um, it's weird. It's a very weird faith, but they don't really have like a super main guy like that. Obviously, this dude Al Hakim, he is seen as a physical manifestation of God. So I'm assuming that's their Jesus, but it, it it kind of seems unlike Jesus that uh, he wasn't exactly like a preacher or something. Like he didn't preach the faith and set forth a lot of the ideas about the faith, as opposed to guys like Jesus and Muhammad and Abraham and stuff like that. It kind of just seems like they were like, yo, this guy fucking rules. That must be God. That's kind of the vibe I get from Al Hakim. But this dude Hamza, he's he's more of like, I guess, an apostle figure. He wrote all the shit down. He made it a formal, systemized faith. Um, and he wrote all of this shit's in Arabic. It seems like to me. That was a big thing that the Muslim conquestors were into, was making everybody speak Arabic, and that's also, it's kind of one of the interesting things about Islam that makes it unique from a lot of other religions and the spread of a lot of other religions, is that most Muslims do speak Arabic, as opposed to Christians who speak a pretty wide array of religions and stuff like that. And like even Catholicism, Catholics don't speak Latin. Like Latin is the religious language of Catholicism, and Arab or Arabic is the religious language of Islam, but they're very different in the sense that the lay people aren't expected to know Latin. Like that's just for the priests and all that stuff. And I'm pretty sure like most of the Qurans are in Arabic and stuff like that. I'm sure they have translations and all that shit, but there, if you want to be a Muslim, you got to speak at least a little bit of Arabic. Whereas opposed to Catholicism, you just go to church and listen to the fucking the priest speak in Latin, and you go, yeah, he's just saying some shit about God or something right now. He could be talking about anything. I have no idea. Um, and so another early preacher from this time was Muhammad al uh, Darazi, Darazi, and he became the external namesake of the religion, although many of his teachings have been rejected by the Druze. So Druze comes from the Dazari part of this guy's name, but they don't call themselves the Druze. They call themselves something else. I don't know what exactly they call themselves. Probably should have looked that up, but who gives a shit? Everyone else calls them the Druze, and it comes from this guy, Al Dazari, Muhammad Al Darazi, not Dazari, Darazi, um, who was, again, one of the early preachers. And again, they just don't fuck with him that much. I don't know why. I don't know what he was saying. I'm sure they just like burned all the books or whatever and were like, fuck this guy. Like I said, it's 1017. If you don't like an idea someone's saying, you just kill him. And that's not even like a 1017 thing in terms of the Middle East. Even now we do that. Even now the Middle East is still being like, yeah, I just don't like what you're saying, so I'm going to destroy all of your artifacts, all of your manuscripts and stuff like that, and then I'm just going to kill you. Although I don't know what happened to this guy, Al Darazi. The Druze don't seem to be like a warrior people or anything like that, which, again, pretty different from Islam in that sense. Like Islam, their main guy Muhammad, he's like a warlord and all that stuff. So there are people that understand the necessity of violence. That's how I'll put it. But the Druze don't seem to be that into Islam. I don't really know what happened to this guy Al Darazi. And so this is kind of one of the most important things when we're looking at the Druze in a modern context. So after Al Hakim's mysterious disappearance, they cut off his fucking head because he was being too religiously tolerant. That's my guess. But his mysterious disappearance in the year 1021 AD, the Druze came under prosecution and closed the faith to conversion in 1043. So once again, that's kind of where they start to delineate from the Muslims and start to incorporate aspects from one of the other Abrahamic religions, being the Jews. Yes, you can technically convert to Judaism, but No, you can't. Right? It's a pretty closed off faith, as opposed to Islam, which is it, in some instances will force you to convert to their religion. Um, and same with Christianity. In the past, the Christians would they didn't take too kindly to people not willingly converting. So, but that's where the Druze start to. This is their first obvious incorporation of ideas from other religions, at least that we've discussed. They had earlier in their conception and in their beginning years and stuff like that. They delineated from Islam a lot more. Obviously, it became its own religion pretty quickly, distinct enough from Islam for it to be persecuted in the Fatimid Caliphate. Although I don't, it's not really clear how long they stay in Egypt because most of their shit is centered around the Levant nowadays. So I don't know how long they stayed in Egypt for. They probably dipped pretty quickly. Although, was the Levant really that much more tolerant at the time? I'm sure it was just ruled by a different caliphate, but maybe it was more tolerant. I don't know that much about the Islamic age of conquest and stuff like that. I'm not too deep into it. So, yeah, that's kind of the background of the religion. We got this guy, Al Hakim, seen as a physical manifestation of God. Um, he's letting him chill for a little while. Then he mysteriously disappears. Oh, I wonder what happened to him. I wonder how the fucking, the Muslim caliphates dealt with people that they viewed as dissenters. It's such a mystery. But he ends up disappearing, and the religion becomes officially closed. It's kind of the main things we got to know here, and obviously the inspiration and the that they took from the Ismaili Shia Islam. And Arabic, dude, Arabic is like trying to read a fucking a school roster in the south side of Chicago or some shit. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of apostrophes, a lot of dashes and stuff like that in this language. And same with black names. A lot of apostrophes, a lot of dashes, a lot of shit like that in there. I don't know. Maybe there's a connection. I know that a lot of slaves were Muslim, but I'm sure they were kind of like that Senegal version of Muslim that I was talking about, where it's kind of bullshit Islam. Not fully bullshit, they still believe in Allah and Muhammad and stuff like that. But I do know a lot of them were of some sort of Islamic faith. So maybe that's why black people have so many apostrophes and dashes in their name and stuff like that, is because their ancestors, and I'm talking about black Americans here. That's what I mean when I say black people, you know. Like if I was talking about Africans, I'd say Africans. When I talk about black people, I'm talking about the black people. The ones that everyone else tries to copy and everyone else tries to be like. Yeah, I'm talking about those ones. But they do got a lot of dashes and apostrophes in their name. And I wonder if it has any connection to the Arabic language. Just something I'm curious about. And so now we're going to talk about the theology of not Islam, the theology of the Druze faith and stuff like that. And we're going to start off by talking about their sacred texts. So the Druze scriptures include the Quran and the epistles of wisdom, as well as several other lost or hidden ancient manuscripts. So once again, these guys are kind of like the Jews' Jew. They have a lot of, and they're very esoteric as well. Even within the faith, there's a lot of esotericism. I don't know if that's the word for it, but there's a lot of esoteric shit even within the faith. Like there's shit that people who are just like everyday Druze, they don't even read, or that they probably don't even know exists. That's like a big thing in this religion. So yeah, those are two of their big ones that they have in there, is the Quran and the epistles of wisdom. And the epistles of wisdom, I fucking forget who it was written by, but they also have this thing called the epistles of India, which didn't know India was so involved in this shit, but they do have the epistles of India. But the epistles of wisdom and the epistles of India and obviously all the other manuscripts, those are like Druze specific, but they do take a lot of religious and even non-religious texts from other religions and cultures and stuff like that. But they do have their own as well. And like I said, they take a lot of outside writings and teachings and stuff into their religion, but with the esotericism and all that stuff, once again, don't know if that's a word, but with the esotericism of it, mm, with the esoteric nature of it, their interpretations of the Quran, and they also have like the Bible and stuff like that. Their interpretations of it are radically different, and so it doesn't really represent the same thing, uh, good or bad. In terms of their interpretations of the Bible and the Quran and stuff like that. And the epistles of wisdom, once again, forget who it was written by, but they revolve around Al Hakim bi Amar Allah, that king we were talking, or I don't know if he's a king, but the ruler of the Fatimid Caliphate, revolves around him and his place as the last and definite incarnation of the one God. So this is a monotheistic religion. They do only believe in one God, and they believe this dude. When I was reading this, it said the last and definite incarnation of God. So I don't know if there were other incarnations of God before this guy, Al Hakim. There might have been. I don't know. But he was definitely an incarnation of God, and he was definitely the last incarnation of God. I don't know if last means there's never going to be another one, or if they just mean like the most recent, because they do seem to have a lot of ideas regarding the physical incarnation of God, or the physical manifestation of God, and we're going to talk about that later on. But yeah, so I don't really know what that means, but that's what the epistles of wisdom are about. Is about just about Al Hakim, which is pretty fucking funny that this dude. It, I'm just kind of guessing that he himself was not a member of the Druze faith. Um, but it's just pretty funny that this guy who's not even a member of that faith is the physical manifestation of God. Although they might believe that he might have secretly been a Druze. I don't know. That's just like pure speculation, purely a guess. I have no idea if that's what they believe. And we're going to talk about why I think they might believe that uh, at the very end of the episode. But yeah, that's kind of what the epistles of wisdom are about. I have no idea what the epistles of India are about. I don't know how that factors into this at all. I don't. I know that India was for a while ruled by a Muslim empire, but I don't know if it was like officially a Muslim caliphate. Although I'm guessing it is. And caliphate might just be a word for Muslim empire, but I do know that a lot of these have a connection to each other that's more than just like friendliness and allyship between states. I do know that there is a deeper connection there. So, but there was the Mughal Empire, which you might have heard about, and they were Muslims, and they conquered most of India for a while there in the 1500s, if I remember correctly. I think that's when they ended up conquering India. So, but the epistles of India, I don't think were written at that time. I think all of this shit was written during that 1017 to 1043, 1021 period, where they were kind of allowed to openly be Druze in the Fatimid Caliphate. Although, once again, don't really know. Just kind of a guess. And so some other scriptures include the Old and New Testaments, and this is pretty interesting. It includes the works of Plato and Socrates, although these can be superseded by Druze writings. It didn't say anything about whether the Quran can be superseded by the 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 Druze writings, but I do know that the Bible, the Old and New Testament, and the works of Socrates and Plato can be superseded by the Druze writings and teachings and stuff like that. And once again, this is why I respect the hell out of these guys, because they're just like, fuck it. We're just going to take the best part from every single religion and school of thought and turn it into one thing. And I really fuck with that. It's being honest. I feel like the Muzzies are a little bit deceitful with their interpretations and beliefs around the Bible, because they're like, we fuck with the Bible, but like the Bible was actually written for Islam, um, and you're all just misinterpreting it. Whereas the Druze are kind of like, yeah, we're just gonna steal all your shit, and then anything we don't like, we're just gonna write our own thing to take precedent over that. I do respect that. I respect the honesty, and I respect the utilitarian, nature of it, of just being like, none of these ones are perfect, so we're just gonna combine all this shit from all the other religions and from the teachings of Plato and Socrates and just make our own religion. Which the teachings of Plato and Socrates, those must have been tough to get in a fucking, just in general, during that time, you know? But especially in the Islamic caliphates, it must have been tough to fucking get their paws on that. So shout out to them for figuring that out. Although, once again, it's a mysterious religion, so this might have happened at a later time when they started fucking with Socrates and Plato. And so now we're going to talk about the God, and we're going to talk about that for a little bit here. So the Druze God is believed to be both transcendent. Sorry, I almost said transcendental. Transcendent and immanent. Meaning it intersects everything, but also extends beyond space and time. So they go really, really deep into their interpretations about God on like an individual level, I guess is the way I'd put it. Like, it's not knowledge just for, the elites of that religion to know about. It kind of seems like everyone has this complicated view of God, whereas most of the other Abrahamic monotheistic religions are just like, yeah, man, you're just not going to get it. And the Druze do have that to a certain extent, but they they're esoteric. You know what I mean? They look at the deeper meanings and ideas behind things and stuff like that. They don't just take it at face value. So they do have a deeper interpretation of God, just generally across the faith. And yeah, this is where we kind of get into like that dumbass like religious talk, like when we did like the Taoism episode and they were talking about like Wei Wu Wei or whatever it is, like the action of non-action. And it's just like, all right, dude, I get it. You're making up a bunch of fancy words so that I think about it forever instead of actually questioning the nature of the religion. That's kind of what that shit feels to me like sometimes. Like, okay, the action of non-action. Let me think about that instead of the actual, meaning and ideas behind the religion. I don't know. It's just what it feels like to me. But that's kind of their view of God, and we're going to talk about a little bit more about that. So this God tracks with the tenets of divine simplicity, and this is a general theological idea that the Druze God applies to. So he simply exists. And he has no human attributes but expresses them all. He is above existence and comprehension. And that's the whole thing about being above existence and comprehension. That's not necessarily a tenet of divine simplicity. That is from the Druze themselves. So once again, kind of respect that, of just being like, yeah, dude, it's God. It's it. We call him him, but he's not actually a him, but he is a him, and also maybe a she, but not a she. Yeah, they're just like, we can't. We as human beings are not capable of applying. We don't have the language required to properly describe God and, you know, what he does and how he feels and what qualities he has. That's kind of what the Druze say about God, and that's what divine simplicity is is it's like, yes, God does have every single attribute of human beings, but he also is just God. And he does have those attributes, but not be he has those attributes because we describe those attributes or prescribe those attributes to him. Jesus fucking Christ. I thought I was going to struggle with the Arabic. I'm just struggling with fucking English right now. Um but that's kind of what divine simplicity, or within this context, that's kind of what divine simplicity means, is that he does have all those attributes, but not because he inherently has those attributes. It's because we as humans kind of have to interpret him in that way. That that's my best attempt at trying to describe divine simplicity in the Druze view of their one singular God. And remember, they only got one of these guys. They don't got multiple. They don't have. I don't even think it's like a Trinity type of setup where it's like the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, three parts of the same whole. Although they do kind of have that. We talked about that guy Al Hakim, and how he was the physical manifestation of God. Um, so they do kind of have that, but it's not as fleshed out as like Catholicism and stuff like that. And so theophany, which that's or not a religious word, that's a Greek word that once again is just another outside idea that we're applying to the Druze faith. Theophany is the idea that God or a deity simply appears in a physical and tangible manifestation, which the Druze believe, as opposed to incarnation. So once again, very similar, but also very different at the same time. So I guess an example of incarnation would be like the Hindus. The Hindus have a lot of ideas about incarnation in the sense that somebody, a human being, is formed. I don't know if they're formed necessarily with the intention of hosting a god, but a human being is formed and hosts a god inside of them, and then that human being is born, and that human being, because they're hosting that god inside of them, is that god. That's kind of what incarnation is, as opposed to manifestation, which is simply, I guess you could kind of say Jesus is an example of manifestation, to put it into context. Like, Jesus was just virgin birth, he was born. That's manifestation, as opposed to incarnation, where it's like this was going to be a human being regardless, but then, because of whatever fucking religious reasons they want to apply to it, because of that, it is now a god. That's incarnation, whereas manifestation is like, no, God just decided to manifest in that form. And it's not because of, any physical phenomena. It's purely supernatural. It doesn't. Trying to explain this is very hard. But that's what the Druze believe, essentially. It's not a human that a god is inhabiting. It is God himself. We got that. He's not inhabiting a human body. It literally is God, but just showing up as a human. It's not a human that is a god. It is God that is a human. If that makes any, if that makes even the slightest amount of sense to you, I would say go to a doctor. That's how I would explain um, manifestation as opposed to incarnation. But that's how they view this guy, Al Hakim. Once again, have no idea if they have like previous people that they were like, this guy was an incarnation of God, or not an incarnation, a manifestation. I just spent 20 minutes stumbling through trying to explain the difference between manifestation and incarnation, and I'm still getting the two words mixed up. I don't know if they have other guys who are manifestations of God, but Al Hakim definitely was. And so, God, I just got done getting the word incarnation out of my mind. Now I'm going to have to say it. So, reincarnation in the Druze faith states that a soul cannot exist without a human body. And we're going to kind of talk about why that's not exactly true, but anyway, it states that a soul cannot exist without a human body, and that males and females are only reincarnated as their respective sex. So, as soon as a person dies, their soul goes to inhabit a new person that was just born. And once again, the Druze is a closed faith. There's not a whole ton of them, so I don't know how they justify that. I don't really know. Um, but they don't believe in like a purgatory, or that, like, I know Hinduism has like a ton of different like worlds and dimensions and stuff in it. Druze don't have that. It's just like this is the earth world, the earth dimension, and this is just where all the souls live. And but not really. Anyway, uh uh and the soul is just immediately passed to the next human body, and it's always going to be a male. A male soul only goes in a male body, and a female soul only goes in a human, or in a female body. Jesus. So yeah, they're probably not down with the whole trans thing. If I had to take a complete wild shot in the dark, they're not down with the whole trans thing. So the only way the soul escapes this cycle is through multiple reincarnations that culminate in unity with the cosmic mind. So I'm not even going to try to understand what this means, because earlier they're like, yo, a human soul cannot exist without a human body to inhabit. And then all of a sudden they're like, but you can unite with God, or what did they call it? Like the great, yeah, with the cosmic mind, and you achieve ultimate happiness. And this is where they kind of start to get a little bit Buddhist, or a lot of bit, or a little bit Hindu with it, right? Because the Buddha, he reached his final nirvana and kind of just became one with the universe and escaped the cycle of samsara. If I remember correctly, that's what it was called. Uh, that might be where the epistles of India kind of starting to come into play, because this does have a lot in common with the the two big faiths that came out of India, which were Buddhism and Hinduism. And obviously, we learned in the Buddhism episode that it's kind of Buddhism is kind of like a derivation of Hinduism. And so maybe that's where they come into play, because this is very, very similar to that. Not in every way, but kind of in the way that there there is no heaven and hell, and you just keep getting reincarnated until you finally just figure everything out, and then you go and join the oneness of the universe, or whatever. That's the Buddhist view of it, at least. I don't really know the Hindu view of it. I know a little bit about the Hindu view of it. You can get reincarnated as whatever. Um, but yeah, that's kind of how the Druze view the human soul and heaven and stuff like that. Once again, that's where they start to become distinct from a lot of the other Abrahamic religions, where all the other ones are like, you get one try and that's it. But these guys, they believe in reincarnation. And so to enter the religion, and this is where they get fucking Scientology with it, honestly. Like, at first I was thinking like, oh, this is just like a esoteric form of Islam. No, they're bringing Scientology into this. Like, literally bring, maybe Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard, maybe he was inspired by the Druze, but it, they do have one very similar thing that they share in common. So to enter the religion, you must sign the Pact of Time Custodian, and the Druze believe that they all have signed this pact in previous incarnations. And once again, that's very similar to Scientology, where they sign like that 1 billion year contract or whatever. That's what this Pact of Time Custodian is. And it even almost sounds like a Scientology type of thing. It sounds like that. The Pact of Time Custodian, like a little bit nonsensical, but not nonsensical. It almost seems like intentionally nonsensical, almost. And once again, all the Jersey shit is done in Arabic for the most part. So it might be one of those phrases that just makes more sense in Arabic, but in English, it sounds like something Scientology would come up with to make some young actor give them all their money, right? That's what the Pact of Time Custodian sounds like to me. And so I guess that's kind of why they don't believe in converts, because they were like, if you really wanted to be Druze, then you would have signed the pact in a previous life. Oh, and that's another thing about incarnation, is that they believe that Druze can only be incarnated as other Druze. So when you get reincarnated, it's not like you're going to be a Muslim or a Christian or a Jew or a Hindu or something like that. You can only be another Druze. So that's a big thing that they believe in when it comes to reincarnation. And so, yeah, maybe that's how they justify being closed off, is that like during that time of great persecution that they faced, uh, if you really wanted to do it and know the truth, you would have signed the Pact of Time Custodian then. Again, I don't know. And so a similar pact exists called Al-Ahad. I don't, that's my Arabic pronunciation of this. It's AL-AHD, Al-Ahad. I don't know, but anyway, this is only necessary for the ukal, uh, ukal, Uqqal, which means the initiated who study the sacred text. So the everyday people aren't expected to study the ancient or the sacred texts and stuff like that. They're not expected to study them too deeply or to find the esoteric meaning of them. Once again, it is an esoteric religion in the sense that it does not believe in the literal texts, but the deeper meanings behind them. That's what esoteric means in this context. But there is the classic, or more broadly interpreted, there's the more broad definition of esotericism in this religion. And so, yeah, that's the other pact that they do if you want to become their version of a priest, aka ukal or yukal. So yeah, they got a couple pacts in there. Only one of them, you don't even have to take the first one, really. Like if you're born as a Druze, they assume you've already signed the pact. Like that's a central tenet of the religion. So really the only pact that you have to sign is the Al-Ahad. And that's really only if you want to do it. Like no one's expected, it's not expected that you become an Ukal or anything like that. And so understanding of the teachings and text fall into three categories. So the first category we have here is Zahir, which is the obvious. It's just what's written down. You can understand it. Anybody can, everyone understands Zahir. They understand the Zahir meaning of the sacred text. And then next up you have the Batin, which anyone can understand if they try hard enough, and these are the esoteric beliefs of the sacred texts. And once again, you have the Ukal and all that stuff to interpret the texts for you and tell you what it means. So it's not necessarily expected that you even, I'm sure it's expected that you read it to a certain extent, but they're not asking you to do all that shit. But anyone can achieve a Batin, 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 understanding of the sacred texts. And this is the hidden meanings of the sacred texts. So esoteric, that's already esoteric. Like the hidden meaning behind it, that already by definition is esoteric. And then finally we have anagoge, which I'm pretty sure is a Greek word, but anyway, anagoge, which is the hidden of the hidden, and this is only achieved by the enlightened. And so another name or another translation of Ukal is the enlightened. And so this anagoge or anagoge, I don't know, whatever, however you pronounce it, the hidden of the hidden, that can only be found by the people who do the Al-Had pact. And so those are the three levels of understanding the sacred texts. And once again, they got a whole fucking lot of them, which is probably why they don't expect the lay people to do all that shit. And so next up, we got this place. It's called Khalwat. Khalwat al-Bayada, and this is basically the Vatican of the Druze. It's the central place of teaching and prayer. So their version of a church is called a Khalwat, um, and it's just like a prayer meeting place, and they do it on Thursday evenings. And basically, the way it works is, it's I think they have multiple guys up there at the same time, as opposed to like Christianity, where you, or at least Catholicism. I don't know about the other ones, but in Catholicism, where you just have the priest, I think they have multiple dudes there preaching and interpreting and stuff like that, or interpreting the Bible and their sacred texts. And so they meet on Thursdays, and then everybody leaves, and all the Ukal stay together and continue doing their interpretations and stuff like that. So that's kind of their version of church, but Khawat al Bayada is their central big one. I don't know if it's like you have to go there to learn how to become an Ukal or anything like that, but it is in a pretty beautiful place. I forget if it's in Israel or Syria. I'll look it up real quick, but it's in like these beautiful fucking mountains and stuff like that. Khawat al Bayada, and I'm pretty sure it was founded by this guy named Al Bayada. It's located in Lebanon. Okay. Yeah, no, it was not founded by a guy named Al Bayada. It was founded in the 19th century by Sheikh Hamad Al Qais. And yeah, it looks pretty sick, up in those mountains up there. It's in Lebanon, right on the Mediterranean. And the Druze, like I said, it originally started out in Egypt. uh Obviously they got persecuted, so they fled. They ended up in the Levant, and they're in Syria, Israel, and I think maybe in Turkey a little bit, in Iraq as well. Although they probably got out of Iraq when ISIS came through, uh and Palestine, I'm sure they're there too, but we don't know exactly how many there are. And once again, that's the final thing we're going to talk about in this episode. So in Hanafi, we talked about the Hanafi. That is from India, if I remember correctly. So maybe that's what the epistles of India are about. But anyway, Hanafi law is followed pretty much to the T, and is derived primarily from the Quran, although some liberties are taken. So that's kind of their religious law, is the Hanafi version. And we talked about how it's mostly descended from uh, Ismaili Shia Islam, but Hanafi is a form, or it comes from Sunni Islam, which once again, that's the other main branch of Islam. And like I said, all of this is complicated by taqiyya, which the Muzzies also believe in, but we're going to talk about kind of why that matters for the Druze. So taqiyya, which is the practice of concealing faith and teachings, especially from those who may misunderstand it. And so this is what I meant earlier when I was talking about how that guy, uh, Al-Hakim, just a guess, they might have thought that he was secretly a member of the Druze faith, because they believe pretty heavily in this idea of taqiyya. I don't know how you say it, but once again, the Muzzies also are pretty big into it. They're also pretty big into what most people would call lying. But yeah, and that's also why we don't know how many Druze there are, because a lot of them, in order to avoid persecution and stuff like that, they conceal their faith and they say they're Christians or Muslims, or I'm sure, no, the Jews run a pretty tight ship, so I'm sure there's not a lot of Druzes claiming Jew. But that's kind of where a lot of this shit gets complicated. And once again, they can lie about the teachings of it. That's another thing about taqiyya. It's not just about, like, people will, especially like Muslims, will try to say, no, taqiyya is only about concealing your faith in order to not be attacked or persecuted or whatever. But taqiyya also includes lying about the meanings behind faith and the ideas behind your faith, for any reason. You can lie about your faith for any reason, is basically what taqiyya means. And so yeah, that's the Druze. They have a whole giant fucking history, that's very interesting and very unique. like I said, that they're a pretty trusted group of people because of how insular they are. Like everyone's like, they're not really on our team, but we definitely know they're not going to play for the enemy team. And so Israel, I think some Muslim groups, but Israel was definitely very big with it. The Christians in like Syria and Lebanon trusted them a lot, um, just because they know they don't have loyalties anywhere else. It's not necessarily the fact that they have loyalties to the Jews or the Christians or anything like that. It's an understanding that that they're not going to be like double agents or whatever, just because of how loyal they are to being Druze. But yeah, that's the Druze faith put very simply. Their interpretations of God, reincarnation, physical manifestation, in the way in which they interpret sacred texts. I hope everyone is listening to this has a good day, a good week, a good year, a good life, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Don't forget to commit to Kia. Ping.